I still remember the sound of their boots on the pavement. It echoed like a final verdict before I even heard their voices. 2 black SUVs pulled up in front of the house, his house, just after 7 in the morning. The sun was barely up, the neighborhood still half asleep, curtains drawn, sprinklers humming. I was standing on the sidewalk with a small plastic bag in my hand. Inside it, there were baby shoes. White, soft, the kind with the little cotton ears like a rabbit. I had saved for weeks to buy them. I had made tamales the night before, sold every single one of them. I was proud. I hadn't seen my grandson yet, not even once since he was born. I thought maybe this would be the day. I hadn't even told Mateo I was coming. I just hoped that maybe if he saw me there, if he saw the shoes, if he remembered the woman who once worked 16-hour days to send him to school, he might at least invite me in. But I never made it to the door. The ICE agents walked straight toward me like they already knew who I was. One of them asked for my name. My heart fell into my stomach, but I nodded. No use lying, no use running. One of them placed his hand on my elbow. The other one asked me if I had any weapons. I remember blinking, confused, as if the question didn't make sense. I was holding baby shoes. I said, "I'm just here to see my grandson." And then the words that would haunt me forever. "We received a report. Someone at this address flagged you as undocumented." I froze. The earth shifted under my feet. I turned toward the house, almost instinctively, like maybe there was some mistake. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone just assumed. But then, I saw the curtain in the front window move slightly. I saw the shape of someone standing there. Tall, broad shoulders, a familiar tilt of the head. Mateo. I opened my mouth to call out, but I couldn't. I was shaking. One of the agents walked up the steps and knocked. I stood there in handcuffs while my son opened the door. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, less curious, like life had wrapped him in something tight and hard. He stepped outside, pulling the door halfway closed behind him. The agent asked him, "Sir, do you know this woman?" There was a pause. It lasted only seconds, but in those seconds, I relived every memory of raising him, bathing him in a plastic tub in Oaxaca, reading him stories in candlelight because we didn't have power, holding his hand the night he had a fever so high I thought he might leave me forever. He looked at me, right in the eyes. Then he said, "No, I've never seen her before. I think my knees buckled. I'm not sure. All I remember is the sting behind my eyes and the way the morning air suddenly felt like knives." The agent didn't even blink. He turned back to me and said, "We'll be taking you in, ma'am." That word, ma'am, struck me. So polite, so robotic, like I was just another number, just another job to finish before lunch break. They led me away from the front yard, my wrists bound, my heart shattered in pieces, so small I could hardly breathe. I looked over my shoulder one last time. Mateo had already gone back inside. The baby shoes fell from my hand. I wasn't allowed to pick them up. I don't know what hurt more, that he didn't fight for me, or that he didn't even try to hide his relief. He was embarrassed, ashamed, like I was some old ghost from a life he no longer claimed. And in that moment, I realized something I'd been refusing to admit for years. My deportation didn't begin with ICE. It began with the silences, with the unanswered texts, with the canceled dinners and forgotten birthdays, with the time he changed his phone number and didn't tell me. The deportation started when I became inconvenient to love, when my sacrifices became a burden to acknowledge, when the story of who I was no longer fit the version of himself he was trying to build in America. Do you know what it's like to be erased by your own child? To have the person you raised deny your existence not out of hate, but out of shame? If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever sacrificed everything for someone only to be discarded like a memory too painful to keep, please, tell me I'm not alone. Drop a comment and write, "I gave everything and they forgot me." Because I know there are others out there like me. Too many. Maybe you were a mother, a father, a grandparent. Maybe you sent money back home for years and still never got a thank you. Maybe you stayed silent so your kids could speak louder. Maybe you worked so hard your hands broke down before your spirit did. And maybe, like me, you believed that love would be enough to keep them from turning their backs. But the truth is, love doesn't guarantee loyalty, and blood doesn't guarantee belonging. I kept thinking, as the van drove away with me in the back, if he would at least text, if he would check to see where they took me, if he would feel even a shred of guilt when he saw the baby shoes lying there on the grass. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't, because people like us, immigrant women, undocumented mothers, we don't get grand exits. We don't get closure. We disappear, quietly, forgotten by the country we tried to belong to, forgotten by the children we sacrificed everything for. Sometimes I wonder what he told his wife, his neighbors. Did he say I was just some woman trespassing? Some crazy stranger? Did he feel safe again when I was gone? Or did he cry when the door closed? Did he pick up the baby shoes? Did he tell himself it was the right thing to do? Because the government made it easy for him. The system gave him the option to choose silence, to say nothing, to lie without consequence. And maybe he convinced himself that it wasn't a betrayal, that it was self-preservation, that I was the one who had made bad choices, that it was my fault I was undocumented, that he was just protecting his family. But I was his family. I am. And the shame he felt when he looked at me, that wasn't mine to carry. That was his. His shame was my sentence. His fear was my prison. And still, part of me wishes he had reached for me, just once, just said, "She's my mother." I would have gone quietly. I wouldn't have begged. I wouldn't have cried in front of them. Just hearing those words would have been enough. Proof that everything I gave up wasn't for nothing. That I wasn't just a ghost wandering into someone else's life. But I didn't get those words. And now, all I have are memories that echo louder in my cell than any conversation I've had in years. I remember the first time he walked, how he wobbled on chubby legs and reached for my hands. I remember the day he called me Mama for the first time. He used to run to me when I came home, even if all I brought him was a half-eaten torta from the job I cleaned. He doesn't run to me anymore. Now he runs from me. And I wonder, what would you have done? If it were your child, standing there, denying you to save himself? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you would have died for? Let me know in the comments. Or just type, "They turned away and I was still standing." Maybe your story will help someone else feel less alone. My name is Lucia Moreno. I am 58 years old, and right now, as I sit on this cold bench in a detention center in El Paso, Texas, I can still smell the soap I used to scrub other people's floors with. The lemon-scented kind, the one I bought in bulk because it masked the sweat on my skin. I used to carry that scent with me everywhere, thinking it meant something, thinking it proved that I was doing something good, something useful. Like maybe if I kept scrubbing hard enough, someone would notice me. Someone would say, "Thank you," but no one ever did. 26 years ago, I crossed the border with nothing but a plastic rosary, a Ziploc bag with my son's baby pictures, and a promise I made to myself that Mateo would never go hungry, that he would never wear shoes with holes like I did growing up, that he would never have to scrub other people's floors unless he chose to. I crossed into this country under the cover of night, in silence, crawling through brush and barbed wire, with my back soaked in fear and faith. I wasn't chasing the American dream. I was running from the Mexican nightmare, poverty, hunger, the same life my mother had, and her mother before her. I left Mateo when he was just 7, the age where they still call you Mama before every sentence. He had these little eyes, so serious for such a small boy, and he used to say, "When you come back, can we go get tacos from Don Luis?" He didn't understand what it meant when I told him I had to leave to get work in El Norte. I didn't have the words to tell him that I wouldn't be back next week, or next month, or maybe ever, but I swore I would build a bridge to him with every dollar I sent. Every cent I earned was a brick in that invisible bridge from Los Angeles back to Oaxaca. I cleaned houses where people didn't even make eye contact with me. I watched their children go to school with packed lunches while I survived on tortillas and instant coffee. I worked 7 days a week, no sick days, no vacation, just more floors, more windows, more silence. And every month, like clockwork, I walked to the Western Union with my pay, folded in an envelope, and I sent it home. For Mateo's shoes, for school, for the roof repair. Sometimes they asked for more. Sometimes I had nothing left. But I always found a way. I lived in rooms I never decorated, in apartments I never called mine. I moved when the landlord asked questions. I slept with my ID tucked into my bra, just in case. I knew the rules. Keep quiet, keep clean, stay out of sight, be invisible. But I never minded, because I believed in the future I was building. A future where Mateo would come find me, where he would hold my hand again and say, "You did all this for me?" I imagined that moment so many times. I held on to it during nights when I scrubbed baseboards until my knuckles bled. I whispered it to myself when other women mocked my accent, when strangers asked me if I was legal, when I waited in the shadows while fireworks lit up the sky every 4th of July, and I wished someone would invite me to watch. Even as the years passed and Mateo's voice over the phone became deeper and more distant, I told myself he still loved me, that maybe he was just busy, that maybe, one day, I'd be enough to make him proud. But now, sitting here in this uniform, orange and rough like it was made to erase my humanity, I wonder if I ever mattered to him at all. I wonder if he saw me as a person, or just a pipeline of dollars, if I was just a wire transfer with a name. I kept every card he ever sent, every drawing, every scribbled thank you. I even laminated the first note he wrote when he learned to spell, "Te quiero, mama." It's still in my wallet, or at least it was. They took everything when I arrived. My belongings are in a clear plastic bag somewhere down the hall, even that note. Sometimes I think about the woman I used to be, the one who held a dream in her heart and soap on her hands. I used to sing while I worked, soft songs in Spanish about mothers and rivers and the moon. I used to believe that if you loved hard enough, it would protect you. But love doesn't always protect. Sometimes it blinds you. Sometimes it makes you stay too long in places that don't love you back. When Mateo came to the US legally in his 20s, I thought everything would change. I thought maybe we could be close again, that we'd finally live in the same city, eat dinner together, laugh like we used to. But he never invited me over, said he was busy, said his wife was uncomfortable having strangers around. Stranger. That's the word that clung to me the most. Like it wasn't just about the country anymore, like I had become a stranger to my own child. But I still kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays. I'd leave gifts on the porch, knock once, and walk away before anyone answered. I thought maybe the baby would change things. Maybe becoming a grandfather would open his heart to the woman who raised him. I thought wrong. Now, in this detention center, every noise sounds like the closing of a door, the clang of keys, the shout of a guard, the quiet sob of someone else just like me, someone who gave everything and still got nothing back. Sometimes I lie awake at night and think about all the women like me, women who raised children with their backs bent and their eyes forward, women who traded their names for jobs and their dreams for duties, women who were forgotten not because they failed, but because they succeeded so silently that no one noticed. Are you one of those women? Or maybe you're the daughter, or the son. Maybe someone crossed oceans for you and you forgot to say thank you. Maybe you didn't know how. Maybe you still don't. That's okay. But tell me, please, have you ever felt like the one thing you gave your life to no longer sees you? If you've ever whispered, "I did this for them," in a room where no one could hear you, I want to hear you now. Leave me a comment. Just type, "I was never invisible. They just stopped looking." Because maybe, just maybe, if enough of us speak, we won't feel so alone in the silence anymore. The story doesn't end here. There's still more to tell. What happened after I was taken, what I discovered about my son, and the truth that would break me all over again. But we'll get to that soon. When I left Oaxaca, it wasn't just the land I was walking away from. I left my son, my entire world. His name is Mateo. He was only 7, and I can still remember the way his tiny hands clung to the edge of my dress that morning. He didn't cry, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't understand what "I'll be back soon" really meant. I didn't either. I had no idea that soon would become years, decades, that the next time I'd see him in person, he'd be a grown man calling me a stranger. I crossed the border with a photo of him tucked inside my bra, creased from folding, almost fading from the sweat of fear. I held onto that picture like it was oxygen. It was him sitting in a red plastic chair outside my mother's house, dirt on his knees, biting into a mango with juice dripping down his chin. That photo kept me moving through the desert, through the hunger, through the nights when I thought I might die alone. I didn't come to the United States chasing a dream. I came escaping a nightmare. Mateo had asthma, and we couldn't afford the medication. He had started missing school because the dust in our home triggered his attacks. My mother did what she could, but she was already too old to keep up. There were no jobs in our town, no clinics, no options. Just prayers, and I had run out of ways to pray. So I made the decision. I kissed his forehead and promised, "Mama is going to make everything better." He believed me. Because at that age, children still believe that their mother can do anything. Even survive a journey that breaks thousands of bodies every year. Even clean houses in a language she doesn't speak. Even send money from a country that doesn't want her there. I didn't know what crossing would be like. I had heard stories, but nothing prepares you for the sound of silence in the desert. It's so big, so loud in its emptiness. You feel smaller than dirt. You feel like you've already disappeared. I remember the man who guided us. He was kind, didn't speak much, just pointed when it was time to move and whispered when to duck. There were 12 of us, 4 women, 8 men. I was the only mother. I didn't talk much, afraid that if I said Mateo's name out loud, it would hurt more. The journey took 3 days, no sleep, little food, 1 bottle of water that I rationed like it was holy. I remember thinking, if I die, who will tell Mateo I tried? That question kept me alive. That, and the thought of him walking to school with a backpack I bought, with shoes that didn't make his feet bleed. When we finally crossed, I collapsed behind a dumpster, behind a gas station in Nogales. My legs didn't work. My stomach was empty. But my hands, they were still holding that photo. I didn't let go, even when the coyote left, even when the sun came up and the world didn't look any different. I had made it. Illegally, yes, but not for myself, for him. I arrived in Los Angeles because that's where a cousin lived. She was renting a tiny room in a basement with her husband and 2 children. I stayed on the floor beside the washing machine. It roared every night while I tried to sleep, but I didn't complain. I had crossed for a reason. Within a week, I was working, cleaning houses in the valley. The first one belonged to a woman who looked at me like I was a smudge on her white floors. She spoke slowly, like I was stupid, pointing to stains with her perfectly manicured nails. "You missed a spot," she said. I didn't answer. I just scrubbed harder. Every dollar I earned, I divided into 3 piles, 1 for Mateo, 1 for rent, and 1 for emergencies. I didn't keep anything for myself, not for new clothes, not for haircuts, not even for food some days. I ate tortillas with salt. I learned how to fill my stomach with water. I walked miles to save bus fare. But Mateo never went hungry again. I sent him money every Friday. Western Union became my church. I stood in line with other women like me, silent, tired, holding envelopes with our hearts inside. I remember once I sent $300 and kept only $20 for myself for 2 weeks. When he needed new shoes, I skipped meals. When he got sick, I picked up extra jobs. I cleaned offices at night and houses during the day. Sometimes I only slept 3 hours. But I didn't care, because every time I talked to my mother and she said, "Mateo is healthy," I felt like I had won a war. Even when my body ached, even when I started losing hair from stress, even when I sat in a bathtub with my knees to my chest, crying because I missed him so much it hurt to breathe. I still remember the first phone call we had after a year of silence. He had learned some English and he sounded different, more mature, a little distant. I was so happy to hear his voice I didn't care. I told him, "Mama is still working hard for you." He said, "Thank you." That was enough. For me, that was a feast. But the years went by and something changed. The calls became shorter, less personal. He stopped asking about me. It was always, "When can you send more?" Or, "Can you help with this?" I didn't mind at first. I understood. Teenagers are selfish. They grow, they get distracted. But deep down, I hoped that one day he would ask, "Are you okay, Mama?" He never did. Still, I kept going. I moved cities, picked up new clients, learned just enough English to say, "I clean good, I'm on time, I work hard." That became my identity. Not Lucia, not a woman, Not a mother, just labor, disposable, replaceable, invisible. I wore gloves to hide the calluses, sunglasses to hide the red in my eyes. I smiled at clients who didn't even learn my name. I scrubbed toilets for people who wouldn't let me use theirs. And through it all, I sent the money. Have you ever lived like that? In between sacrifice and silence? Have you ever loved someone so much that you became a ghost just to make their life brighter? If you have, I want to hear your story. Please tell me in the comments, or write the words, "I disappeared so they could live." Let's show each other we're not alone. The story keeps going. Because what came after all this, after decades of giving, was a betrayal I never saw coming. And it broke more than just my heart. It broke who I thought I was. When Mateo finally came to the United States, I thought it would be the beginning of everything I had waited for. He was 21, full of life, with a student visa and plans to finish college in California. I had waited almost 15 years for that moment. I imagined it so many times, I thought I would fall to my knees when it finally happened. But when it did, there was no tearful airport reunion, no warm hug that erased the distance. It was just a text. "I'm here." 2 words. That was it. I begged him to come see me. I lived just a few hours away. I told him I'd cook all his favorite meals, chiles rellenos, arroz con leche, even those little fried quesadillas he used to love when he was a boy. He said he was busy with school, maybe another time. So I waited. I told myself it was just the stress, that he needed time to settle, that once the dust of moving had cleared, he'd remember. He'd come, but months went by, then years. He never made the drive. I made it once, unannounced, taking a Greyhound bus at 4 a.m. I waited outside his dorm, holding a small care package, tamales wrapped in foil, a pair of socks I knitted, and a framed picture of us when he was 5. I waited for almost an hour. When I finally called, he didn't answer. 10 minutes later, I got a text. "I'm in class. Can't talk." He never mentioned the package, never said thank you, never asked what I was doing in town. Still, I didn't give up. I was his mother. And mothers don't stop loving, not even when it hurts. Over time, Mateo graduated. He found work, got married, and with every new milestone, I drifted further out of view. I found out he was engaged from a cousin who saw the announcement on social media. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I wasn't even told it was happening. I sat at my kitchen table that day, holding the same picture of us that had survived every move, every cheap apartment, every tear. I thought maybe he didn't want to expose me. Maybe his wife didn't know about my immigration status. Maybe he was protecting me. That's what I told myself. But the truth was simpler. He was ashamed. Of me. Of where he came from. Of the woman who cleaned toilets so he could go to college. I still remember the first time I met his wife. It wasn't at a family dinner. It wasn't even on purpose. I was working at a house in the hills. Big, white, with glass walls and a cold echo that made you feel like you weren't allowed to breathe. I was vacuuming the guest room when I heard my name. "Mama?" I turned, and there he was, Mateo, dressed sharp, holding hands with a tall woman who looked confused. "You work here?" he asked, like I'd done something wrong. I nodded, my face burning. "Yes, mijo. I clean this house on Thursdays." He didn't introduce me. Not really. Just said, "This is my mother," and changed the subject. She gave me a polite smile. The kind you give a clerk at a store, and then they left. He didn't even hug me. That night, I cried in the supply closet before finishing my shift. I still had to mop the floors. After that, something broke. He didn't answer my calls, didn't respond to texts. He blocked me on social media. I was erased from the version of his life that he shared with the world. No pictures of me, no stories, not even a caption that said, "Thanks, Mom." I found out about his child, my grandson, from someone else. Again, a friend of a friend. There was a baby shower, dozens of photos, balloons, cake, smiling faces. My name wasn't even whispered. I made a small blanket, spent hours embroidering the corners with tiny stars. I mailed it to their home. Weeks passed, no reply. I never saw that blanket in any of the baby pictures. I started to wonder if he even told his wife about me, or if I was just some shadow in the background of his memories, some ghost he didn't want to explain. But I still sent birthday cards, still left small gifts at their doorstep on holidays. Sometimes I caught a glimpse of them through the window, laughing, playing, happy, and I'd walk away before anyone saw me. I told myself it was enough, that at least he was okay, that I had done what I came to this country to do. But the loneliness was louder than ever. You can clean houses filled with people and still feel completely alone. You can send money, send love, send pieces of yourself every month, and still be invisible. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come from death. It comes from erasure, from being alive and still forgotten. Have you ever felt like that? Like you gave everything and still became nothing in their story? If you know that feeling of loving someone who doesn't see you anymore, please tell me. Write it below. Or just type, "I still love them even if they erased me." You're not alone. There's more, much more. What came next wasn't just painful, it was betrayal in its purest form. And it changed everything. In the beginning, I tried not to take it personally. I told myself he was busy. That life was moving fast for him now. College degree, career, new wife, a baby on the way. I kept making excuses for Mateo, because the alternative was too painful. The idea that he might have chosen this distance. It was something I didn't know how to carry, so I wrapped it in hope instead. I told myself, he'll come around. I had said those words so many times, they started to lose their meaning, but the signs were all there. One by one, they stacked like bricks around me, building a wall I was too afraid to name. It started with the short replies, text messages with no warmth. Then it was missed calls, forgotten birthdays. The baby was born, and I wasn't even told. No one sent a picture. No one asked if I wanted to meet him. I found out through a mutual friend who had seen the announcement on Facebook. There he was, my grandson, wrapped in blue, resting in the arms of a family that didn't have room for me. I waited weeks before I had the courage to go see them. I didn't want to show up uninvited, but I also knew if I waited for an invitation, I would be waiting forever. So one morning, I went to the dollar store and bought a gift bag. Inside, I placed a small pair of socks, white with tiny clouds on them, and a hand-crocheted blanket I had made during my evenings off. I folded it gently, wrapped it in tissue paper, and added a card that said, "From Abuela, with love." I took the bus across the city, 3 transfers, 2 hours. I practiced what I would say the whole ride. I just wanted to drop this off. I don't need to come inside. I won't stay long. I wasn't asking for much. Just a moment, a glimpse, a crack in the wall. When I arrived, the neighborhood was quiet. The houses were identical, neatly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, the kind of place that doesn't welcome strangers. I stood outside his home for a long time, just holding the gift bag. My palms were sweating. I adjusted my shirt, smoothed my hair, and finally, I took a breath and walked to the door. Before I could knock, I saw movement behind the curtains. Someone peeked out. Then nothing. Just silence. I stood there for almost 2 full minutes before I turned around and began to walk away. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I just placed the gift on the doormat, hoping someone would open the door and see it before the sun got too hot. I had barely reached the sidewalk when I heard a car engine down the block. I didn't think anything of it. I was too caught up in my own thoughts, replaying the last 10 steps in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. But then I noticed the car slowing. Black SUV, tinted windows. It rolled to a stop just ahead of me. My stomach turned to stone. I didn't run. Where would I run to? I just froze, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. 2 men stepped out. One held a clipboard. The other adjusted something on his belt. "Ma'am, can we speak with you for a moment?" one of them said. I nodded. My voice was trapped somewhere between fear and familiarity. I had seen this scene before. I had heard the stories, but never once did I think I'd be in it. "Do you have identification on you?" I told them I didn't. I never carried anything unless I had to. It was safer that way. They asked for my name. I gave it, quietly, as if whispering it might change the outcome. "We received a report," one of them said. "Someone at this address flagged you as undocumented." The words didn't make sense at first. My mind couldn't hold them. I blinked, looked back at the house where my son lived, the house where my grandson had just been born. I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone saw me and assumed. But when they walked to the porch, I knew. I knew before they knocked. I knew when Mateo opened the door. His face was unreadable, blank, as if he had rehearsed that moment in his head, decided exactly how he would handle it. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. I was standing 20 feet away, in full view, my wrists already trembling from anticipation. One of the agents asked him, "Sir, do you know this woman?" He hesitated, but only for a second. "No," he said. "I've never seen her before." He said it so easily, like it was true. Like the years I spent cleaning houses for strangers so he could wear clean shoes had never happened. Like the woman who stayed awake all night during his fevers wasn't real. Like every single sacrifice I made was just a forgotten detail in a story he had already rewritten. In that moment, I didn't feel human. I felt like a shadow, like a mistake, like someone who had loved too hard and for too long without realizing that the love was never going to be returned. The agents turned to me. One of them said, "You'll need to come with us." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My voice had vanished. My legs, too. I followed them like a ghost, numb, hollow. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was not the handcuffs. It wasn't even the stares from the neighbors or the weight of the van door slamming shut behind me. It was the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. Even then, even as I was being taken, he didn't look at me. He had already deleted me. Some people are deported by the system. Others are deported by silence. I know now that mine began long before the van, long before the knock on the door. It began with every unanswered message, every "I'm busy," every moment he let me slip further into the shadows without pulling me back. That's how deportation really works. It doesn't always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with indifference, with shame, with the quiet decision that your presence is no longer convenient. Have you ever felt that? Like someone made the silent choice to erase you? If you've lived that kind of heartbreak, please tell me. I want to know I'm not the only one. Right below. They turned away. I was still right there. Or share your own words. Because maybe if we speak, we become visible again. The van ride was the longest silence I've ever known. Not because it was quiet, far from it. The engine hummed low, the metal floor clanked with every bump, and someone in the back sobbed quietly, her tears falling into the stillness like rain in a desert. But the silence I'm talking about, the real silence, was inside me. That vast, aching silence that happens when something inside you dies, when you know without doubt that the person you love most has shut the door on you for good. I sat chained at the wrists and ankles, across from a young girl who couldn't have been more than 19. Her hands trembled. I could tell she was new to this, new to fear, new to humiliation. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to reach across the aisle and say, "It's going to be okay." But I didn't, because I wasn't sure it would be. Not for me, not for her, not for any of us. The facility we arrived at was beige, lifeless. It smelled of bleach and old sweat, the kind of place that tries to erase your presence with sterilization. We were herded out, processed like packages, not people. I gave my name, again. They took my fingerprints, again. My photo, again. But every time they entered me into a new system, I felt less like myself, less like a mother, less like Lucia, more like a number they needed to contain. They handed me a uniform, orange, rough, with seams that scratched my skin. I changed in front of two women I didn't know. There was no privacy, not even dignity. My own clothes were sealed in a plastic bag and tossed into a bin. I reached into my pocket, looking for the folded picture of Mateo that I always carried. It was gone. Taken. They led me to a cell. Cement walls, metal toilet, thin mattress on a steel frame. The kind of room that doesn't hold warmth, not even from memory. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. It was there, in that freezing silence, that I let myself cry. Not for my freedom, but for the realization that I had no one. Days passed. Or maybe it was weeks. Time is strange in detention. You lose the rhythm of the outside world. Meals come at odd hours. Lights never fully go dark. They leave them dimmed, so you're always half awake, half exposed. You learn to listen, to the whispers of other women, to the guard's footsteps, to the echoes of a door opening too fast. We were 23 women in a space built for 15. Some were barely old enough to drink. Others were grandmothers, like me. Each one had a story. Each one had lost something. A country, a child, a name. And in that cold room, we became each other's mirrors. We didn't talk much in the beginning, but after a while, when the fear softened into fatigue, we shared small pieces of our lives. One woman had been picked up while buying groceries, another during a traffic stop. One had been reported by her employer when she asked to be paid, but the one that hurt me most was the woman who said, "My son called ICE on me." I remember sitting up straight. My stomach twisted. I said, "Why?" Her answer was quiet. "He said I embarrassed him." That was the first time I said it out loud. Mine too. The room went silent for a second, and then, slowly, women started nodding, like we were part of a secret sisterhood no one talks about. Mothers who gave everything and became disposable. Mothers turned strangers. It was the kind of grief that doesn't make headlines, the kind that rots you from the inside because you don't know how to scream without sounding ungrateful. One night, after lights out, a younger woman passed me a folded napkin. "Read it," she whispered. Inside was a prayer, written by hand, in shaky Spanish. It said, "God sees what they tried to hide." I kept that napkin under my pillow. I read it every night before trying to sleep. It reminded me that somewhere, even in this dark place, someone still believed I mattered. The guards didn't treat us badly, but they didn't treat us like people either. Orders came fast. Faces stayed blank. No one asked our names more than once. We were cells on a chart, shifts to get through. I learned to keep my head down, to do what I was told, not because I was afraid, but because I was tired. The food was gray, always the same. Rice, beans, something resembling meat. I forced it down. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed strength. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not here, not yet. I started writing letters I never sent, to Mateo, to his wife, to the grandson I never got to hold. Pages filled with words I knew they'd never read. I told them about the women I met, about the napkin, about the way the light came through the bars at exactly 4:30 p.m. I told them I forgave them, even if they didn't ask for it, even if they didn't deserve it. But the hardest part, the moment I still think about at night, was when I overheard one of the guards talking on the phone. She was reported by a relative, he said. Her own kid, apparently. That's when I knew. It wasn't just a guess. It wasn't a neighbor. Mateo had done it, on purpose. He hadn't just closed the door. He'd locked it from the inside. And even then, even after all of that, some part of me still tried to understand. Maybe he thought I was a threat. Maybe he thought I'd ruin his chances of citizenship. Maybe his wife pushed him. Maybe he was scared. That's the worst part of being a mother. Your instinct is always to protect, even from the truth. I think what hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the knowing that I still loved him after it, that I still thought of him when I closed my eyes, that I still remembered how he used to rest his head on my chest and ask me to sing, that I still heard his voice in my dreams, before it grew cold, before it grew distant. Some nights, I wished I could scrub it all away, like the stains I used to wipe off walls for people who never knew my name. I wished I could erase the image of him standing on that porch, looking me in the eye and saying nothing. But memory doesn't work like that. It lingers. It stains deeper than bleach. And in that cell, with nothing but time, I had no choice but to face it. Have you ever sat alone with a truth so painful it changed the way you breathe? If you've ever felt forgotten by the very people you built your life around, I want to hear your voice. Please leave a comment below. Write, "They buried me alive, but I'm still breathing." Or tell me your story, because maybe when we speak the truth, no matter how ugly, we begin to heal. I don't know exactly when it happened. The shift, the quiet click inside me that changed the way I sat, the way I looked at the guards, the way I folded my blanket every morning like it mattered. Maybe it was after the 5th unanswered letter I wrote to Mateo. Or maybe it was the day one of the women in the cell turned to me and whispered, "You don't deserve this." She didn't even know my full story. But she said it with such certainty, like maybe, just maybe, someone believing I didn't deserve to be thrown away was enough to begin remembering that I was still someone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some loud, revolutionary moment. It was quiet, internal, like something heavy inside me had shifted to make room for something else, anger, maybe, or clarity, or the faintest echo of self-respect. For weeks, I had existed in that detention center like a ghost. I spoke only when spoken to. I did everything I was told. I didn't complain, didn't question, didn't ask for more than what was handed to me. Because somewhere deep down, I had absorbed this idea that I deserved it, that being undocumented, being poor, being betrayed by my son, meant I had no right to ask for anything. But when you sit in a cell long enough with other women who have lived through the same brutalities, who cry the same tears into the same thin pillow, you start to realize just how wrong that idea is. We weren't criminals. We were survivors. Survivors of violence, of poverty, of abandonment, of systems that chew you up and spit you out and then act like you're lucky they didn't swallow you whole. We were mothers, sisters, daughters, neighbors, and little by little we started saying our names out loud again, sharing pieces of ourselves that no one had cared to hear in years. And I started to feel it. That thing I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Worth. I began to wake up with intention. I made my bed with more care. I took time folding my towel, brushing my hair. These were small rebellions, yes, but inside that cold, colorless place, they were sacred. A way of saying, you can strip me of my clothes, but not my dignity. The other women noticed. One of them, Anna, a woman from Guatemala who hadn't seen her children in over a decade, asked me to teach her how to embroider. I used threads from old socks, pieces of cloth torn from a discarded uniform. We made tiny birds, stars, names. We stitched silently, side by side, building something beautiful from the scraps we were given. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Her name was Clara, a nurse, soft-spoken, with kind eyes that didn't dart away when she looked at us. I hadn't seen her much before. She worked in the medical wing where they sent women who got sick or were too depressed to eat. But that day, she was filling in at the dorms, checking on everyone. She stopped at my bunk. I don't know what she saw. Maybe it was the way I was sitting, or the napkin prayer tucked under my pillow, or maybe the embroidery I was hiding beneath the mattress. But she paused. She asked, "Are you okay?" No one had asked me that in a long time. I nodded, out of habit, because yes is easier than explaining a lifetime of no, but she didn't move. She sat beside me. And in the quietest voice, she said, "I think someone like you shouldn't be here." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe her, but it felt dangerous to hope again. So I just looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I let someone see all the pain in my eyes. She came back the next day, and the day after that. Each visit, she asked more questions. Where I was from, how I ended up there, why my son had turned his back on me. I didn't lie. I didn't sugarcoat. I told her everything. One afternoon, she brought me a small notebook and a pen. "Write it down," she said. "All of it, even if no one reads it. You need to let it out." So I did. I wrote about Mateo, about the porch, about the exact moment the officer asked, "Do you know this woman?" And my son looked away. I wrote about the gift bag with the baby socks, about the embroidery I never finished, about the houses I cleaned and the shoes I patched with cardboard to save money for his school books. I wrote until my hand cramped, until my tears soaked the page, until I could no longer tell the difference between memory and ache. Clara read every word. She brought it to someone she knew, a pro bono immigration attorney who occasionally took difficult cases. He wasn't promising anything, but he said I had a chance, that there were inconsistencies in how I'd been detained, that with the right support, maybe I could fight. The word fight felt foreign in my mouth. I had spent so long surviving that I forgot what it meant to push back. But I agreed, not because I thought I'd win, but because for the first time, someone stood next to me and said, "You deserve to be seen." We started working on my case, collecting every letter, every receipt, every wire transfer I'd sent over the years. Clara helped me write a declaration. The other women gathered around me as I read it out loud, hands shaking, voice cracking. When I finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, they clapped. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I laid on that stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling, thinking maybe, just maybe, something was changing. The next morning, I was called to the front desk. A package had arrived. Inside was the photograph of Mateo I thought I'd lost. And behind it, tucked between folded pages of my declaration, was the napkin prayer. God sees what they tried to hide. Have you ever felt that? That flicker of something breaking through the darkness? That moment you realized your pain was real, your story mattered, and your voice wasn't lost? If you've ever felt invisible but found a way to speak, write to me below, or type the words, "My voice still lives." Because if there's one thing I know now, it's that silence doesn't heal anything. Speaking does. The story's not done. What came next tested everything I had left, and I want you to be here when I tell it. The process that followed felt like dragging a broken leg through an endless marathon. Immigration hearings are not places of compassion. They're places of paperwork, protocol, waiting, and judgment. You're not seen as a mother, a human, or even a voice with history. You're a file, a risk, a case number to be processed and, more often than not, discarded. But Clara kept showing up. She stood by me every time they called my name. She didn't have to. She wasn't family. She wasn't paid. But there she was, her calm voice, her hands holding papers I didn't understand, her presence like a quiet promise that I wasn't completely alone anymore. The lawyer she connected me with was blunt. He didn't lie to me. He said, "This is going to be hard." He told me my chances were low, that most women in my position get deported quietly, with no headlines, no fuss. "But we'll try," he added. And that single word, try, meant more than anyone else had given me in years. We worked on my defense for weeks. Every night, after dinner, I rewrote my declaration by hand, over and over. I wanted the words to be perfect. I wanted the judge to feel my story, not just read it. I wrote about Mateo, about the betrayal, about the years I spent sending every cent I earned. I listed every sacrifice, not to make them pity me, but to remind them I existed. Clara helped me gather letters from people I used to clean for, those rare few who saw me as more than help. Some wrote beautifully. "She's hardworking, respectful, honest." Others kept it short. "She cleaned my house for 8 years, never missed a day." Even those few lines meant something. Proof, a paper trail of my dignity. And then came the hardest part, the court date. They woke me early that morning, gave me a fresh uniform, let me shower. I sat in the back of a van, chained again, wrists to waist, ankles locked. But this time I held my head higher, not because I thought I'd win, but because I refused to let them take what was left of my spirit. When I stepped into the courtroom, I scanned the room. It was small, quiet. The judge looked tired, like he'd seen too many of us already. My lawyer sat to my right. Across from me, a government attorney shuffled papers like they were nothing more than grocery receipts. They read my file out loud, my name, my entry, my undocumented status, my son's betrayal. They made it all sound sterile, like numbers, like policy. But then it was my turn to speak. The judge asked if I had anything to say. My hands trembled, my throat dried up, but I stood. "I came here for my son," I said. "Everything I did, every floor I cleaned, every blister I got from mopping, every meal I skipped so he could eat, was for him." The judge didn't move. I kept going. "I never broke any law except entering. I never stole, never lied. I worked, I loved, I gave, and now I'm here, because I was erased." The room was silent. I pulled out the napkin prayer. I held it up. This was given to me by another woman like me. It says, "God sees what they tried to hide." I don't know if this court sees it, but I do. And I just want the right to keep existing in the country I helped build, for a child who no longer claims me. My voice cracked. I sat down. The rest was a blur. Paperwork, questions, legal codes. But all I could hear was the pounding in my chest, the fear, the hope, the truth. They didn't decide right away. That's not how it works. They said they'd notify my lawyer, that it could take weeks, maybe longer. So they returned me to the detention center. Same cold bed, same metal toilet, same limbo, but something felt different. The women I returned to, Anna, Rosa, Carla, they all hugged me. "You were brave," Anna whispered. And in that moment, I realized that even if the judge said no, even if I was sent away, I had already reclaimed something I thought I'd lost: my voice. Weeks passed, time dragged. Each morning, I looked out the tiny window, watched the sun stretch its fingers across the wall, and tried to breathe without thinking of Mateo. But it was impossible. Every quiet moment was filled with his absence. And then, one afternoon, Clara came rushing into the cell block. She was breathless, eyes wide. She held a paper in her hand. "They granted it," she said. At first, I didn't understand. "What?" "Your case. You're being released." Time froze. Everything inside me stopped. "Released?" I whispered. "Yes. You're not being deported. You're getting a hearing with a pathway. You're staying. You did it." I collapsed into her arms. The other women clapped, cried, hugged me. Even the guards softened. I was going home. Or whatever home was now. When they finally let me change back into my own clothes, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My face had aged. My hands looked older. My back curved more than before. But my eyes, they held something new: fire. I walked out of that center with nothing but a plastic bag, a bus voucher, and a folded napkin with fading ink. But I felt like I had reclaimed a country that was never meant to include me. Not because of laws or systems, but because I refused to vanish quietly. I wasn't ready to face Mateo yet. That pain was still too raw. But I knew I'd find my place. I knew I'd begin again. Not for him, but for me. And maybe, just maybe, for women like me. Women who cross borders and lose everything. Who give and give until there's nothing left but a whisper of who they were. Women who have been erased, silenced, and betrayed. We deserve to be heard. We deserve to be seen. If you've ever fought to prove you mattered, fought to hold on to yourself in a world that tried to erase you, please share your story, or simply write, "They tried to erase me. I refused." Because every time we speak, we remind the world we're still here. And what happened after I was released brought even more truth to the surface. And it's time I share that with you. The day I walked out of the detention center, the sun hit my skin like I hadn't felt it in years. It warmed my arms, my neck, even my scalp beneath my hair. I tilted my face upward, closed my eyes, and breathed in the smell of the outside world: car exhaust, dry dust, and a faint trace of fried food from a vendor down the street. It was chaotic, imperfect, alive. I was free, but I didn't feel like I had returned to anything. Because when you lose everything, even freedom feels like starting from zero. I had no home to go back to, no family waiting, no celebration. Just a bus ticket and a slip of paper with the address of a shelter Clara had arranged for me in East LA. She offered to drive me herself, but I told her no. I needed to do this part alone. I needed to walk through the city on my own 2 feet, not as a housekeeper, not as a detainee, but as a woman rebuilding herself, brick by broken brick. The shelter was quiet, clean, a converted church with high ceilings and soft, uneven light filtering through old, stained glass windows. My room had a bed, a nightstand, and a mirror that was cracked in the corner. I unpacked what little I had, a few clothes, the napkin prayer, my court documents, and folded them neatly into a small drawer. It didn't feel like home, but it didn't feel like prison either. And that was enough. The first few days, I didn't speak to anyone. I ate my meals slowly, kept to myself, spent most of my time walking the blocks nearby. I watched mothers with strollers, teenagers on skateboards, men unloading fruit stands. Life was happening. And for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to clean up after it. I found a small park a few blocks away. There was a bench beneath a jacaranda tree, and I'd sit there in the late afternoon, watching the petals fall like purple snow. Children played nearby. One little boy reminded me so much of Mateo, his laugh, the way he ran, the wild curls bouncing with each step. I never spoke to him, but I watched, quietly, longingly. Every evening I wrote in my notebook, pages and pages, about the detention center, about the women I met, about the nurse who believed in me. And slowly, the tone of my writing shifted. Less survival, more reflection. I started to wonder, not about why Matteo betrayed me, but about who I was beyond being his mother. What pieces of myself had I buried in the process of giving everything away? I began attending free therapy sessions offered by the shelter. The counselor's name was Marlene. She had soft features and a calm presence that made it easy to open up, even when my words came out in pieces. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, not even Clara, about the loneliness, the shame, the nights I cried into my pillow, not because I missed my country, but because I no longer knew who I was without someone to sacrifice for. Marlene said something that stayed with me. "You're allowed to mourn what never loved you back." I didn't respond. I just nodded, because there was no other way to say yes without breaking. With her help, I started looking for work again. It wasn't easy. I was still undocumented in every way that mattered, and though I now had legal permission to stay while awaiting my next hearing, it didn't mean employers were lining up to help. I returned to what I knew best, cleaning. But this time, I set my own terms. One house. A kind woman named Teresa who paid fairly, left thank you notes, and once told me, "You don't work for me, you work with me." It was a small step, but it was mine. Then one day, as I scrubbed a window, I heard my phone buzz in my apron pocket. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Hi," a voice said. "Is this Lucia?" "Yes." There was a pause. "It's Mia, Matteo's wife." Her voice was tight, controlled. I stopped breathing. "I found some things," she continued. "Letters, gifts, pictures." I didn't know what to say. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I didn't know what he did." What he said. She trailed off. There was another silence. Then, "He left." My knees buckled. I sat down on the floor, sponge still in hand, dripping soapy water. "He left us a few months ago," she said. I think he couldn't face it anymore. The guilt, the lies. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. My chest felt like it had been cracked open. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she added, "but if you want, if you're willing, I'd like you to meet your grandson." My hand shook as I held the phone. I thought of all the years, all the birthdays, all the times I stood at their door with gifts they never opened. Now, this. "I don't know," I whispered. "I understand," she said gently. "But if you change your mind, you have my number." I hung up, sat in silence, stared at the floor like it had answers. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? Hope? Maybe all of it. Maybe none. That night, I walked to the park, sat under the jacaranda tree, watched the children run, and I asked myself something I hadn't dared to before. What if my story wasn't over? What if it was just beginning? Have you ever been offered something you wanted for so long, but it came too late, too twisted, too tangled in pain? If you've ever been torn between healing and protecting yourself, please tell me. Write below. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm listening. Or share your own moment of almost forgiveness, because these stories matter. Yours matters. And we are never as alone as we think. I didn't sleep that night. My body lay still, but my mind wandered through every memory like a hallway lined with open doors, some familiar, some I had boarded shut years ago. The sound of Mia's voice echoed between them, soft and uncertain, but clear. "I'd like you to meet your grandson." A sentence so simple, yet so heavy I could barely hold it. I stared at the cracked ceiling above my bed until the pale morning light began to bleed in through the window. And even then, I wasn't sure. I kept turning the thought around in my head. What if he looked like Matteo? What if he smiled like him? What if he ran to me with the same open arms his father used to have when I picked him up from kindergarten, covered in glitter and sticky from juice? What if I looked into his face and saw everything I had lost and everything I was afraid to want again? But beneath all those thoughts was something even deeper, something smaller, quieter. What if he loved me? I wasn't ready to call Mia back, not yet, but I found myself walking by their street the next week, my steps slow, cautious, like I was sneaking up on my own past. The house looked exactly the same. Cream-colored walls, white door, wind chimes still hanging on the porch. I stood across the street for a long time, just watching. No one came out. I didn't dare walk up the steps. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "I'm afraid of being invisible again." Marlene, my counselor, listened quietly the next time we met. "You're not the same woman who stood on that porch before," she said. "Back then, you were asking to be let in. Now, you get to decide whether you want to knock." That changed something in me, because for so long, my life was shaped around being chosen, by Mateo, by employers, by the system. I had forgotten that I had a choice too. I wasn't just a mother waiting for scraps of affection anymore. I was a woman who had survived abandonment, betrayal, detention. I had been discarded and climbed my way back. That mattered. Still, I didn't rush. Instead, I took time. I crocheted a new blanket. This one was blue and green, soft yarn, each stitch made during moments of stillness. It wasn't for Mateo. It wasn't for redemption. It was for the boy, the one who had no say in any of this, the one born into a silence I never chose. When I finally called Mia, her voice was gentler. She told me he'd been asking questions. He saw a photo, asked who the woman was. I told him that was his abuela. My chest tightened. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "But he keeps asking about you." A week later, I found myself standing at their door again. But this time, I wasn't holding a gift bag with trembling hands. I had the blanket folded under my arm. And I had something even more important, a sense of self that wouldn't be broken this time. The door opened slowly. Mia looked tired, but kind. She stepped aside. "He's in the living room," she said softly. "Playing." I took a few hesitant steps inside. The house smelled like toast and cinnamon. There were toys on the carpet, crayons on the coffee table. It was a home, lived in, real. Then I saw him, a small boy sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing something that looked like a monster truck with wings. His hair was wild, his cheeks flushed. He looked up, and just like that, time cracked open. His eyes were Mateo's, but they held none of the distance, none of the shame. He blinked. "Are you the lady from the picture?" I nodded, unable to speak. "My name's Lucas," he said, standing up and walking toward me without fear. "Do you know how to draw dragons?" I smiled, a small, broken smile. "I don't, but maybe you can teach me." And just like that, he took my hand. In that tiny palm, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, acceptance that didn't need to be earned, love that hadn't yet been poisoned by shame or silence. We sat together on the floor. He drew. I watched. I gave him the blanket. He wrapped it around his shoulders like a superhero cape. "This is mine?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I whispered, "all yours." Mia sat quietly in the corner, watching us. There was no need to talk, no apologies, no explanations. That moment wasn't about the past. It was about the breath between us, the small miracle of being seen again. I stayed for an hour, maybe 2. When it was time to leave, Lucas ran to get a sticker from his drawer. "It's for you," he said, sticking it on my sweater. It was a star, gold and shiny. Outside, the air smelled of rain. I stood on the sidewalk for a while, the sticker still on my chest, and I thought about all the nights I had cried in silence, believing I would never matter again. But I did. I do. Not because Mateo said so, not because a court gave me permission, but because I chose not to disappear. That night, I returned to my room, peeled the sticker off gently, and placed it inside my notebook, next to the napkin, next to the court papers, next to the photo of a life I thought I'd never see again. Because sometimes healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in the form of a small hand, a crayon drawing, a single word, abuela. And in that moment, I didn't need forgiveness from Mateo. I didn't need closure. I just needed to know that some part of me had survived, had rooted itself deep enough to bloom again. Have you ever experienced that? A moment so small, yet so powerful it made you feel human again? If you've ever found healing in an unexpected place, a child's voice, a second chance, a silent moment, please share it with me. Or write, "I didn't vanish. I became someone new." Because every story of quiet survival helps someone else find the courage to begin theirs. And what happened after? What Mateo did next, when he learned about our reunion, will take this story to a place even I didn't expect. Stay with me. I didn't expect him to come. After everything, after all the silence, all the ways he erased me with his absence, I never thought I'd hear his voice again. But 3 weeks after I met Lucas, after that quiet, beautiful afternoon of crayons and capes and healing, he called. I almost didn't answer. The number flashed on my screen and froze me in place. It was like my heart remembered him before my mind did. Before I could stop myself, my thumb pressed accept. There was a pause on the other end. Then, a breath. Ma. Just that. 1 word, 2 letters, 1,000 cuts. I didn't respond right away. I needed to hear what kind of silence he would sit in. If it was the silence of shame or the silence of someone trying to find their way back. He finally spoke again. I'm sorry. The words trembled out of him like something he'd never said before. I didn't know how to fix it, he said. I just wanted to protect what I had. My job, my house, my family. I thought, if I distanced myself, maybe it would be easier. I closed my eyes. My hand clutched the edge of the table. And it wasn't, he whispered. It only made everything worse. I didn't forgive him right away. That's not how real healing works. It doesn't come with a single conversation. But I listened, and in his voice, I heard the boy I once raised. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. The boy who, despite everything, was still somewhere inside this man who had tried so hard to forget me. We met a few days later in a small cafe off a quiet street. It was awkward at first. His eyes stayed low. Mine stayed cautious. But eventually, he looked up, and I saw it. The pain, the guilt, the longing. I want to make it right, he said. And maybe he will. Maybe he won't. But that part of the story is no longer mine to carry alone. Because now, I have my name back, my dignity, my purpose. I am no longer just someone's mother, someone's burden, someone's ghost. I am Lucia. I am a woman who crossed oceans, borders, heartbreak, and detention walls, and still found a way to exist in a world that tried to erase her. I work now at a nonprofit, helping other immigrant women find legal support and rebuild their lives. I teach crochet classes at the shelter once a week, and sometimes, on sunny afternoons, I take Lucas to the park. He tells me his stories, and I tell him mine, not the ones about pain, but the ones about resilience, about how love can survive even when everything else falls apart. To those of you who've stayed with me through this journey, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Sharing this story was not easy, but I did it because somewhere out there, I know another woman is watching, another mother, another survivor, someone who needs to know that even if they've been forgotten, they are not alone. If you're still here, if this story touched you, I ask you from my heart, leave a comment below, even if it's just a sentence. Write, I still have a voice, or my story matters, because it does. You matter. Every single word of your truth is worthy of being heard. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel. Here, we honor real stories. We speak the unspeakable. We listen without judgment. Every new video is a chance to feel seen, to connect, and to remember that healing is possible, one story at a time. Click on the next video that's about to appear on your screen. Maybe it's not your story, but it just might be the one that changes you. Thank you for being here. You kept me company through every word, and I hope, in some way, I kept you company too.